This is The Hermit from the iconic British fingerstyle guitar album entitled The Hermit. Right. I was fresh out of college when I met John Renbourn. I was 23, and as the case with a lot of music graduates, you wonder what on earth you're going to do next, right? And I happened to support John at my local folk club, and he took an interest in what I was up to, because I write a lot of music as well, so we shared musical tastes. But I come fresh out of college with 4 years worth of technique. But it's one thing playing that and playing your final recital at a music conservatoire. It's another thing walking out, treading the boards with a legend like that, So he taught me how to try and, perform in the real world. Sitting in the pocket, feeling the groove, that kind of thing, talking to the audience. Yeah, it was a massive learning curve that will be forever grateful for, the opportunities. It's a question that comes up in workshops, for example, and basically, you're vibrating the string in a different way when you play the harmonic. You play a harmonic at the 12th fret instead of the string doing, that. it's now doing this thing, right? So you want to clear as much space as possible for the string to vibrate. In other words, if your hand is too far up here, too close to the fretboard, you're going to disrupt too much of the vibration there. So the closer you are to the bridge, the cleaner the harmonics. Okay. Also, if you're a nail player, you're going to get that kind of crisp sound. With the flesh, it's not, you're going to have a huge open frequency range there. It is possible, but it's not quite the same as, you're reducing the frequency. There's a real peak there if you look at it on an EQ visual. But the crisp, either going to get it from a thumb pick or a straight edge or nail, So that's how I do it. So if I'm playing something, and I want to get to there, I might just move the hand back ever slightly, and then back in, if I remember. In terms of harmonics, you've got the 12th fret. It's an interesting one. You've got the 7th fret, 5th just behind the 4th, just in front of the 3rd, and so on. I don't use those ones. But one that I did discover that might be useful for people, right, is that these 7th fret harmonics, you can play those an octave higher, and that really helps in some musical situations. So for example, if you've got an A here, right, if you touch the A at the 7th fret, and with your little finger you touch the 12th fret on the same string, right, so you've got that and that, then you get the A an octave higher. So instead of going up for this, you can just go to that. So instead of this, now you've got, and they actually are useful. Well, back in, I think it was February 2020, we all got sent home, right? Um, and as the case with many musicians, contemporaries of mine, were wondering what on earth we're going to do next. I had a bucket list of things to do, including learning a whole bunch of John Renbourn's pieces. A guy I toured with for a number of years. I'd always wanted to learn, for example, the Pelican, or the Hermit, Pavander Aragon, Lady and Unicorn, My Dear Boy, Lady Goes to Church, tons of them, right? So I started learning a few. I think I started off with Pharaoh's Rag, actually, from the Hermit record. And then my curiosity took me further into the world of alternate tunings, like that Pelican piece, for example, is like D-A-D, and then an E on the third string. It's like Dad-Gad, but the third string tuned all the way down to E for those harmonics, and it's... so I learnt that. For learning, it was a mixture of learning from scores. Some of it wasn't written out, as far as I knew anyway. For example, I decided to include a few pieces from the Bert and John record. So pieces like Red's Favourite, and No Exit and Orlando were fun to work out, because, especially because when they were recorded in London, John is hard left and Bert is hard right on the panning, so you can really get a lot of separation there. So I just transcribed them. John Renbourn also collaborated with a guy called Marco Rossetti, a fantastic classical guitar player and transcriber and arranger from Italy. It's interesting to note that the last versions of John's famous pieces were worked out in collaboration with Rossetti. For example, if you take a piece like Lady Goes to Church, I think the story is that John was... there was enough space on the vinyl for one more cut, right? So they asked John, what have you got left? And I think he had like an A section from one piece that was in A minor, and a B section, or another A section actually, from another piece he was starting that was in B minor. So they recorded the A minor section with the capo on the second fret, so it was now in B minor. And then for the middle section, they took the capo off, played the other part, and then put the capo back on to close out the piece, right? So the original version of Lady Goes to Church is actually unplayable live, because they just spliced it together. But when John collaborated with Marco Rossetti there, they created a full version of Lady Goes to Church, all in B minor. So I learnt that one, for example, from the score. Just as an aside, for anyone who's interested, the University of Newcastle were lucky enough to extract all of the compositional scores on paper from his church he lived in the Scottish borders, and they've been digitised, right? And up till now they've managed to scan over 10,000 pages of composition. So there's still a lot there to be discovered by someone who's willing to travel over and search through the stuff. For example, that Pelican piece, listening to the original from the Black Balloon record, it's acoustic guitar, and then that, the harmony guitar comes in. I thought, geez, it'd be fun to do that on the flute. And I know John loved the bass clarinet and reed instruments in general. So I thought, well, I have a bass clarinet line there. And so there was that kind of thing. I just like to orchestrate some of his pieces. So it was fun to do. I'm trying to think of some others now. So Clear, obviously John sang on the original there. I got Aravata, my sister, to sing this version, and he knew my sister, and he liked her voice and everything, so that was cool to get her on it. And there's also a piece called Oh Death that didn't get played very often, actually, perhaps because of the title, I don't know. But it's one of John's greatest songs, I think. And if you listen to the version, it's available on record or even on YouTube. It's him singing. There's a cello on it and a recorder, and with a couple of guitar lines. Such a cool priest in your hand of wine. And it's got Renbourn written all over it, isn't it? So I really wanted to do something with that. So I ended up reorchestrating it. I used cor anglais on it. Cor anglais is like a slight, it's like an oboe with a huge bowl at the bottom of it. It's like a baritone for guitar. It's like the baritone of the oboe world, right? It's a cool sound, quite reflective, and kind of has a yearning quality to it. So, I thought, geez, who would be the best person for that? And there's, one of the world's famous cor anglais players out there is a fella called Jean-Luc Fillon. I thought, geez, I'll just try and write to him. And he wrote back and he was up for it. So I was really privileged to have him on the record, and then I also, got a whole battery of percussion in there as well, and nylon string, baritone, electric, more cor anglais. Yeah, that was cool. So that was a major reinterpretation, and I wrote another 2.5 minute coda as well for him to improvise over. So that's one track I'd really like people to hear from that record. Yeah. This guitar was made by a chap called Ralph Bown, and he's based in York in the northeast of England. So it's a one-man outfit. He built guitars for John Renbourn. He had two main guitars throughout most of his career. One was a Franklin, which was a beautiful instrument. It is a beautiful instrument. I believe it's owned by John's grandson. And then the other one is a early 1980s Ralph Bown OM size. And I'm kind of, I feel the responsibility, but I am the custodian of that guitar. So Ralph, I got to know him through John, and he built one for me back in the early 2000s. Interestingly, actually, it had a really thin neck on it, and I found it quite hard playing with the thin neck. I was trying to press. I figure that if the neck is slightly thicker, your thumb is further away from your fingers, so it's actually easy to play and you can stretch better. So I sent that one back to Ralph. I wasn't really in that privileged position, but I was actually getting pains just here. And I've noticed it's not uncommon for guitar players to get a pain just from here. And I think that's from a neck being too thin. So he built me another one, and then, it lasted me over 20 years. But it's made of Brazilian rosewood, so you only have to look at Brazilian rosewood on a tour and it splits, right? It split so badly I could actually post a letter through it, right? So I needed another one, and he very kindly made this thing for me a couple of years ago. This is a Sitka spruce top with Malagasy rosewood back and sides, slightly wider neck so I can get the voice separation for those pieces like the Hermit,